The eve before a king is crowned, Britain and the world gets ready for the coronation of Charles III. These are the scenes inside Westminster Abbey where the stage is set. In just over 12 hours, the nation and the world will watch as Britain welcomes a new monarch for the first time in 70 years. Earlier, the King and members of the royal family surprised well-wishers who have staked their place along tomorrow's procession route.
Are you staying out all night?
Yes, we are.
Oh my goodness, it's going to be a long evening. But hopefully,
no rain,
hopefully, if there's enough sort of people out here.
Behind me, a quiet Buckingham Palace from where the King will leave for the biggest moment in his life, which he has been groomed for from a young age. On the Mall, crowds from across the country and around the world are already building ahead of the big day.
We have Prosecco. We have red wine, chocolate, red wine, brandy.
We did the funeral, we did Lion Steak, we've done the hat-trick. This is where we are.
Yeah.
Also tonight, bad local election results for the Tories as they lose out to surging Liberal Democrats and to Labour. We're in the red wall asking voters if Labour is making baby steps back to power. And we hear from the Queen's Maids of Honour as they revisit their memories of her coronation.
We were like a sort of girl band in a sort of way before girl bands existed.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omar from Buckingham Palace.
Good evening from an outside and expectant and, dare I say it, excited Buckingham Palace with the King on the cusp of his coronation. The crowning moment of Charles's decades-long apprenticeship is almost upon him when he will be enthroned with his wife and consort Camilla in a ceremony that originated a millennium ago. Together they took part in a final rehearsal before the King, joined by his son William and daughter-in-law Kate, did a relaxed walkabout in front of us here along the Mall. With such a big day ahead, Charles and Camilla have opted for an early night at Clarence House, their home from home just a few minutes from the palace, from where they will leave in the morning. At Westminster Abbey, those rehearsals are over and everything is in place. The grandest of stages is set for a ceremony, the like of which has not been seen for 70 years.
Inside Westminster Abbey tonight, a first glimpse at the stage set for the King. The Coronation Theatre ready for the next act of Britain's long royal history. The 700-year-old St Edward's chair on which the King, like all his ancestors before him, will be crowned. Earlier today, for the King and Queen consort, a drive to the Abbey, their final run-through ahead of Charles's date with his destiny. If the heavens weren't kind to the patient campers, they were about to get an unexpected boost. The King stopping his convoy to talk to the crowd. Hundreds of phones raised, hundreds of hands outstretched. Some gentle flattery, good wishes, and a salute.
Are you staying out all night?
Yes, we are.
Oh my goodness, it's going to be a long evening. But
Kate on the other side and William getting the same rock star reception.
There are, of course, different degrees of anticipation about the coronation, but the mood here on the Mall is already pretty buoyant. And the royal family clearly wants people to feel involved with these walkabouts, meeting and thanking as many people as possible. And here is the King. How are you?
I'm all right.
Hello, sir. How do you feel about tomorrow?
Are you going to be squashed here for the rest of the night?
Probably.
For those who had their moment with the King, something to remember.
And what did you say to the King?
I said, I remember the last coronation when your mother was crowned. And he said, so do I. I was there. I was 4 years old.
And you seem really moved by this.
Yes, because we don't often even see our president. So for me to be able to come and see your king, your future king, is a moment in my life. It's fantastic.
Away from the crowds, there was international diplomacy to be done too, with representatives from over 200 countries and territories in town. The Secretary-General of the Commonwealth told me that under Charles, that institution will still thrive.
We've got 56 countries representing 2.5 billion people, and they want to celebrate this because it's not just the King as His Majesty King Charles III, it's also the head of the Commonwealth.
There was a final acknowledgement of the crowd before Charles walked alone to his palace. When the King is seen tomorrow, it will be with all the full gilded splendour the British Church and State can muster. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
Well, like a giant magnet, the coronation is pulling people from all around the country and, of course, indeed right around the globe towards this, the ceremonial heart of London. The vast majority are drawn by the majesty of it all, and they'll be crowding the pavements between here and the Abbey tomorrow. Some of the best seats in the House, though, will be reserved for dignitaries and statesmen and women as Britain welcomes the world.
Cheers! Cheers! On the Mall today, many were already raising a toast. Others, a tent.
We don't even know if all the parts of it.
And a fair few tried both at once.
Right, cheers. Good. Oh, yes. Cheers. Normally we'd have put our tent up early before we'd had our 3 bottles.
We have
Prosecco.
We have
red wine,
chocolate, red wine, brandy.
All the essentials.
Yes, absolutely. All the essentials to keep us going all through the night. Yeah.
I want to know why you're mad enough to do this.
We did the funeral, we did Lion State, we've done the hat trick. This is where we are.
Yeah.
The Japanese people, it's very great that you celebrate this in this kind of way.
Plenty from abroad have come to see how we do things at home. Millions more will watch via international media.
Where are you guys from?
We are from Australia.
From Lisbon, Portugal. We are going to cover the whole event from 8:30 to 4 p.m.
Wow, so it's a big deal in France.
Yes, it is a big deal.
When the cars are swapped for carriages tomorrow, this will be only the second coronation in history televised live, and for most people on the planet, the first that they've ever been able to watch. Broadcast to corners of the globe, no coronation has reached before.
Those watching in foreign lands will spot familiar faces, their own leaders invited to attend. Many are here already, like the President of Brazil, the Prime Minister of Australia, and America's First Lady. A chance for diplomacy, according to those who've practiced it, and for Britain to sell itself.
In recent times, to the extent that we have made global headlines, it's been for political instability and chaos. 3 Prime Ministers in 12 months, that brief 40 days of Liz Truss. This is an opportunity to show a different side of the UK.
But there are others who'll feel tomorrow like they're on another planet.
Are you excited for the ceremonies that are going to take place and all the street parties?
No.
At this pub in Cambridge, the coronation won't be celebrated, perhaps even commiserated.
Speaking to customers, quite a few of them were saying, oh, I'm not that bothered. So we decided to do a not that bothered party for the customers.
But those who've prepared the pomp hope tomorrow will be a crowning moment for King and country. Paul Brand, News at 10, Buckingham Palace.
Well, Chris is here with me now. Chris, you've been royal correspondent for 5 years, to say the least, a tumultuous 5 years, the death of the Queen, Prince Philip, and much else besides. Where do you think tomorrow's event, the coronation, stands in that period of time?
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. I mean, look, even in the past year, less than a year, we've had a Platinum Jubilee, a state funeral, and now this coronation. And even Christmas was bookended by those claims by Prince Harry, first in Netflix and then in the book. So yes, it's been a difficult time for the royal family. That said, I mean, I've just taken a walk, you know, from here all the way up to the top of the Mall, to Admiralty Arch. There are tents on either side of the Mall, people camping out. It's pretty damp out there and they're still doing it. That surprises me every time I see people there. But look, tomorrow's going to be a spectacle. Whatever you think of the monarchy, whether you support it, whether you hate it, or whether you're somewhere in between, it's going to be a really big moment. Not just the sort of crown that hasn't been used for 70 years or a chair that dates back to the 1300s. When the King and Queen come out of Westminster Abbey, the procession will be so long that they'll be at the Abbey and the front of the procession will already be halfway down the Mall. It's a mile long. It's going to be spectacular, and I think the whole world will have their eyes on the UK tomorrow, not for the first time in the last year.
Extraordinary. A hint, though, I pause to use the word controversy, but some sort of debate about this whole issue of the homage, the oath that's the people will make. And there's some suggestion that King Charles is a little uneasy with that.
Well, the whole thing about the homage of the people was came out of the idea of modernising a very ancient ceremony that dates back to 1066 and William I. And instead of having the homage of the peers, they decided to have the homage of the people, where, you know, anyone watching, whether that's in the Abbey or on television, can say "God save the Queen" and all the rest of it. Sorry, "God save the King" and all the rest of it. Yes, it has changed. I just think, look, that is something that hasn't gone down particularly well. We're told now it is an invitation for people to do, not an expectation. But it is part of that modernisation, which includes, for example, female bishops taking part for the first time. That includes hymns being sung in Welsh, Scots Gaelic and Irish Gaelics. There's lots of things that have changed from the last coronation that we saw in 1953.
Very interesting. Chris, stick around. We'll be coming to you again later in the programme. And as I was saying later in the programme, I'll get the inside track on how King Charles is feeling tonight, because I've been talking to Queen Rania of Jordan, a long-time friend who has been with him this evening. Now, to the all-important local election results in England, which have been coming in all day. The Prime Minister called them disappointing, but then again, he couldn't really call them anything else. The loss of more than 1,000 councillors was at the worst end of the Conservative predictions. For Labour's Sir Keir Starmer, his party's gain of 527 council seats puts them, he claimed, on course for a Labour majority at the next general election. If Sir Keir doesn't get that majority, he could do worse than look to the Lib Dems. They were buoyed up by gaining over 400 councillors. Even their leader, Sir Ed Davey, said he hadn't expected to do so well.
It started when most of us were asleep. Labour taking control of Plymouth Council. And then the Brexit heartland of Stoke. On the eve of the coronation, the Lib Dems seized Windsor and Maidenhead. After dawn, Labour secured Medway for the first time since Blair's heyday, and there was another Lib Dem victory in Dacorum in Hertfordshire. The big story of the night, the collapse in the Tory vote almost everywhere, as symbolised by 22-year-old George Blundell ousting the Tory leader of Windsor's council.
It's clearly a deeply disappointing result for the Conservatives tonight. Our residents have spoken and spoken decisively. But look, what I would say is there are clearly national issues at play.
A Tory minister and MP for Plymouth, which turned red, didn't hide his despair.
We've had a terrible night. It's the worst I've experienced in this role. But look, obviously there are factors at play. There are big local factors at play. And we've got to take this on the chin and come back fighting.
And for the next national poll, the general election, likely in around 16 months, they think they're well set.
You didn't just get it over the line, you blew the doors off. Amazing, amazing set of results. And make no mistake, we are on course for a Labour majority at the next general election.
Greens had their best ever performance, taking a mid-Suffolk council, and they swiped at Starmer.
This vote shows that people feel utterly disillusioned with this government and uninspired by the Labour Party.
8, 7, 6, and enough time has now passed since the Lib Dems self-harmed by joining the Tory coalition in 2010 for a proper, old-fashioned surge.
We've beaten the Conservatives in Bath and in Brentwood, in Hertfordshire and in Hinckley. We're making gains off Labour. The people have sent a huge message. A message so loud that even someone as out of touch as Rishi Sunak can't ignore.
He, delivering bacon rolls to his troops, was rueful about not yet bringing home the bacon for his candidates. Nowhere near.
It's always disappointing to lose hard-working Conservative councillors, their friends, their colleagues, and I'm so grateful to them for everything that they've done.
Silsia Manwa, for Labour, is now the youngest councillor in Thurrock.
Today is a good start. I think we have to see this as a start. We have a lot of work to do, but I hope it's promising. And I think by the time we have the next general election, we'll be in a much better place.
Party time for them in Swindon and all over England. Although ITV's election experts say Starmer has only done enough to be confident Labour would be the largest party after a general election, rather than win an outright working majority. And for the blue team, re-evaluate, regroup, try to recover. Robert Peston, News at 10.
Well, to find out why people have switched their votes away from the Conservatives, two of our political correspondents have spent the day in key areas of change. In a moment, we'll hear from Carl, who has been to both Windsor and Berkhamsted, where there's been a surge in support for the Lib Dems. But first, Harry has been to the Red Wall area of Teesside, where not everything went Labour's way.
In Hartlepool, Labour woke up this morning as the largest party on the council. But talk to voters here and there are signs its Red Wall rebirth is still in its infancy.
To be honest, I don't know that Labour have necessarily provided an alternative, a clear alternative to the Conservative Party. We've been forgotten about for a long time here in the North East, but also Teesside in particular, and people need to start paying attention.
Across town, this coffee shop helps vulnerable locals. The owners say the cost of living struck a chord with voters here.
The people that would maybe have voted the Conservative Party during the COVID vaccine bans are really taking it in the pocket.
2 years ago, Boris Johnson oversaw a by-election win here at the peak of his electoral powers. This morning, the picture was far more gloomy for the Conservatives, and the man who hopes to win back this seat for Labour says the tide is now turning.
You're never going to get every result you want every single time, but the clear messages, Middlesbrough last night, taking back the mayoralty from Andy Preston. So I think we are making that progress and we're building towards a majority at a general election.
When the votes were counted down the road in Stockton, the Conservatives booked the trend and gained 11 seats. The local MP says everything's to play for at the next election.
I'm delighted that we have put some of these incredible local champions into office. I'm not surprised. We earned it. These guys worked incredibly hard.
With the ballot boxes cleared away for now, Labour still has work to do to win back its old North East heartlands. Harry Horton, News at 10, Teesside.
Winning here puts the Lib Dems in charge of filling potholes for the King and emptying bins for Theresa May.
The Lib Dems won 13 seats here in Windsor and Maidenhead and are now doing a victory lap down Eton High Street. And you don't get much more Tory heartland than that.
I would say to lots of Conservative MPs in blue wall seats like Windsor and Maidenhead, watch out, because we're about. And the Conservatives have let people down. They are
Theresa May
touch.
amongst them?
I'll let the voters, the next election, be the judge of that.
But the Tory council leader was unseated by 22-year-old George Blundell, who hadn't even taken today off work.
I think it got to a point where people thought we needed a fresh start, and I guess I might be part of that sort of fresh start, so I'm very happy.
He's not the only one. Just around the M25 in Hertfordshire, the Lib Dems took Decorum Council this afternoon. This is where they've launched their assault on the Tories' blue wall, and you can see why.
Very unhappy with the current government, very unhappy, and the two previous Prime Ministers obviously absolute disasters.
I'm a natural Conservative voter, but the mess that they've made of things and Boris and the way they've behaved, I'm very disappointed in.
So you're a first-time Lib Dem voter. Who would you normally have voted for?
Conservative.
The question, of course, is whether Ed Davey is benefiting from some anti-Tory froth or from something stronger that could linger into the next general election. Carl Dinnan, News at 10, Windsor and Maidenhead.
Well, nearly all the results of yesterday's elections are now in, and Anushka has been looking at what's happened across England. So, Anushka, do you think that this sets Sir Keir Starmer on course for number 10?
I mean, they suggest he could well be on course, but there is a big question mark over whether that would be with a majority. Clearly, it is a bad day for the Conservative Party. Labour took councils like Plymouth, Medway and Swindon and Dover, which are both described as bellwethers, where results have historically indicated who wins a general election. And there was progress in the Red Wall too, gains in places like Hartlepool and taking control of Stoke-on-Trent Council. Labour up 17 there to a total of 29 seats in an area with 3 Conservative MPs. They're even happier about Medway. The MPs in this part of Kent have been Tory or UKIP for some time, but these are seats that were won by Tony Blair. Now, the other threat to Rishi Sunak's party, as you've been hearing, are Lib Dems, gleeful after taking councils like Stratford-upon-Avon, Windsor and Maidenhead, and Surrey Heath with Michael Gove as a local MP. He will cling to examples of voters switching back in general elections. But I do have to show you Lewes District Council in Sussex. Tories were the biggest group here. 19 councillors all out tonight, with Greens in first place and then the Lib Dems in second. So can I find some nuggets to cheer Conservatives up? A few. They won Torbay Council and avoided losses in some key battlegrounds like here in Walsall in the Midlands. Colin says Labour really needs to be doing better in places like this to win a majority. Colin Rallings, our expert.
Keir Starmer would very likely be the Prime Minister and by way of becoming the leader of the largest party in Parliament, would put together a minority government or maybe a coalition. But Labour need to do better still, I think, to guarantee that they can actually form a government of their own come the general election.
Now, projections for overall vote share give Labour a lead of between 7 to 9% today. That is well below where Blair was ahead of 1997. Labour say they don't need a landslide and think if they can pick up seats in Scotland, this could get them a majority. But Tories think this leaves them with some hope, and things can certainly change a lot ahead of a general election.
Thanks very much, Anushka. And now let's speak to Robert, who's in Westminster. I mean, Robert, obviously dreadful results for the Tories, but no big win for Labour either. So what do both parties, do you think, have to do now?
Well, let's be under no illusion. Lots of Tory MPs panicking tonight. A loss of 1,000 seats, or more than 1,000 seats for them, was right at the top end of what they feared. Labour is now the largest party in local government, something that it has not enjoyed since 2002. And if you just think about where the Labour Party was, not long ago, at the end of 2019 in the general election then, for it to be absolutely credible that Keir Starmer will be in 10 Downing Street when the election happens in probably 15 months or so, that's an extraordinary surge forward. But you are right, there are quite a lot of Labour MPs, Labour activists, who are disappointed that the results were not even better. As Anushka's pointed out, Colin Rawlings, our great expert, says that on Labour's lead, it's more likely than not that this would translate into a hung parliament, although we don't quite yet know how Scotland's going to sort of settle down with SNP in crisis and Labour seemingly making progress up there. The problem for Labour is so many seats were also won by the Greens and the Lib Dems. Really tremendous performances by both of those. The one bit of hope that Anushka said, what crumbs of comfort are there for the Tories? The one crumb of comfort is this for the Tories. If Rishi Sunak has stabilised things for the Tories, and let's be clear, he inherited a terrible situation, that awful mini-budget, all the criticism of Boris Johnson and all of that, strikes going on at the moment, public services in turmoil. If he stabilised it, and it doesn't get any worse, then that is, frankly, a basis on which the Tories can at least plan to avoid humiliation in 15 months' time. But let's be clear, that is a crumb of comfort. That is not the sunny up plans.
OK, Robert in Westminster, thank you very much indeed. Now, Russian efforts to capture the long-fought-over Ukrainian city of Bakhmut have hit problems. The head of the private military Wagner group fighting on Russia's side has threatened to pull his troops out of the battle. Yevgeny Prigozhin is accusing Russia's military commanders of not supplying the ammunition his forces need to finish the job. They were aiming to capture Bakhmut by next Tuesday in time for the anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. How the world longed to hear these words 3 years ago. COVID-19 is no longer a global emergency. While the World Health Organization finally confirmed the symbolic end to the threat, the pandemic isn't over, the organization said. Indeed, there have been jumps in the number of cases in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. Its boss believes the true number of deaths was at least 20 million, far more than the official figure of 7 million. Now, back to events here in the morning. There is, of course, a clear and well-rehearsed plan for tomorrow. It is the merging of a millennium of history with Charles's 21st century modernity. We'll let John Ray guide us through what to look out for tomorrow.
It will be history on a grand scale, played out on the nation's greatest stage, an occasion few of us have witnessed before. One we're all invited to watch.
So many royal journeys have started here, but none is so momentous in the reign of a monarch. It will be a stunning spectacle, steeped in history, intended to live long in our memories. The day of the coronation.
7 decades since the last one, and a society transformed, but the purpose is unchanged.
We're going to see the King's first ceremonial outing, a parade before his people, receiving their assent to his reign. And ultimately, of course, as the old adage goes, you have to be seen to be believed.
They leave Buckingham Palace shortly before 10:30 to travel down the Mall, through Admiralty Arch to Trafalgar Square, and then on along Whitehall, past the Houses of Parliament, arriving at their destination just before 11 o'clock.
From the roar of the crowd to the quiet of the Abbey, for all the talk there's been of modernisation, at the heart of this ceremony are ancient rites and rituals to anoint, to enthrone, and to crown the new king.
The roots of anointing go back 3,000 years.
William the Conqueror, crowned here on Christmas Day 1066, would recognise the core of the service.
We're drawing on very, very deep wells. Here in the Abbey we have the Liber Regalis, beautiful illuminated manuscript, produced in the 1380s, reign of Richard II, tells us how to do a coronation. Actually, it's the playbook we still use.
Queen Elizabeth, your undoubted queen.
The ceremony starts with the act of recognition. The monarch is presented to the Abbey, historically, to ensure there's no mistaken identity. Then in front of the altar, the king takes a coronation oath, promising to uphold the law, to rule with justice and mercy, and to defend the established Anglican Church.
I solemnly promise so to do.
But in words added to the service, and in the presence of other faith leaders, the nation's diversity will be reflected. The most sacred part of the ceremony takes place at the historic St. Edward's Chair, where the king will be anointed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's an intimate moment, deliberately shielded from public view.
It is a sacred moment, it's a traditional moment, but this is a moment between a very faithful Christian king and God. And that's why it's hidden, as it has been in the past.
And then the climax of proceedings. The Archbishop of Canterbury will place the St. Edward's crown on the monarch's head. Having taken possession of the kingdom, the monarch is symbolically lifted onto the throne. And then, for the first time since the accession of George VI, a king's consort will be crowned, and Camilla will be known officially as the Queen.
For some people it will be particularly poignant because the only other queen they've known is the late Queen Elizabeth. And I think it will then become very real to everybody that the page has been turned in the history of the monarchy.
Charles will leave the Abbey wearing the imperial state crown, exactly as his mother once did. He and his Queen will board the gold state coach, used in every coronation since 1831. At the head of the biggest military procession since 1953, 6,000 members of the British Armed Forces and at least 35 Commonwealth nations marching together.
After the parade, the pomp and all the pageantry, there is still time for the observation of one final tradition. The appearance here before the crowds of the newly crowned King and Queen.
Eyes will be raised to the heavens for a military flypast, including a Battle of Britain Spitfire, on a day of iconic image making, designed to be replayed for generations to come. John Ray, News at 10.
Well, the group of people who have any real understanding of the lives of King Charles and his Queen Consort is a pretty exclusive club. Queen Rania of Jordan is a long-standing friend of the King and is herself the Queen Consort in her own country. This evening, she was at an eve of coronation reception here at Buckingham Palace, and shortly afterwards, I spoke to her and asked her what it was like being here for the coronation.
This is a very important day in the history of the United Kingdom, and I think for the world. I think for the vast majority of us, it's probably the only time we witness the coronation of a monarch. It's the kind of occasion that you'll be telling your children and grandchildren stories about. I think everybody will remember where they were on the day of the coronation.
Do you think the occasion of the coronation tomorrow, though, is going to go beyond the United Kingdom and resonate around the world?
Absolutely. I mean, we already know that there are going to be hundreds of millions of people watching the event on their televisions, and this tells you just how much interest people have in the royal family and how much it adds value to this country.
You've just come from a reception where I understand King Charles was. How did he look to you? A little bit of butterflies, did you detect?
Well, no, I think he's taking it all in his stride. He seems to be in very high spirits. He is, you know, as I've always known him to be, someone who's extremely compassionate. He's a very genuine person. He's very approachable. You know, he's somebody who always has a way of making people feel at ease.
Have you seen him change over the years? Because you've known him for a long time. Have you seen him change over the years in any way?
I think he's just more... Fundamentally, he's the same. He's very values-driven, and you know, he has the principles that he truly believes in. So the fundamentals of his character have not changed, but I think he's just grown more comfortable in his role. He's certainly more personable, and in many ways, I think we're the ones who have changed our view of him, because he's been ahead of us. You know, like. When the environment, for example, we've all caught on to what he's been saying for years, that we are facing a cross-border existential threat that requires action today. And this is something he's been preaching for so long, since the 70s.
And you know Queen Camilla very well as well. You hosted her, I think, in November last year. How do you think stepping into this role of being Queen and Queen Consort will affect her? Because that's what you became in 1999 as well.
Right.
Any tips?
Well, you know, as I always say, there's no roadmap, there's no job description for the role, but it's something you learn as you go along. But I think she's got a really strong track record of using her voice and her position and her platform to support causes that she cares about and to draw attention to them. And she has spent years building her relationship with the British public, and I think it's her candidness, her sincerity, and you know, she's very approachable. All of these things have really endeared her to the public, and I think they will serve her well now as Queen.
The word historic is quite overused sometimes, but tomorrow really is. I mean, this is the first time that this country has changed or has a new monarch since 1953. What kind of day do you think it will be?
I think it's going to be a balancing act tomorrow, but I think it's a day of celebration and unity for this country, and it's a day of pride because, you know, as I said, so many people around the world will be watching. There's a lot of admiration for the traditions and the heritage, and I do think that the royal family here is just part of the British brand, and it's one that distinguishes this country from many countries around the world. So it's something to really cherish and rally around, I think. So I think it's going to be a day of celebration and unity for this country.
Great. Queen Rania, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Queen Rania of Jordan sharing her thoughts with me a little earlier this evening. Well, to be able to remember the last coronation, you have to be in your mid-70s, rather like the King himself. He, of course, had a front row seat. Among the few who can also say I was there are two of his mother, the Queen's maids of honour. For them, like Charles, tomorrow will bring back some very powerful memories.
From a room upstairs at Buckingham Palace, the 4-year-old Charles, his dressing gown still on and his little sister by his side, watches as his mother leaves for the Abbey. He's seen again, peeking through the curtains, craning for a better view of the astonishing scenes outside. Tomorrow, of course, he'll have the best seat in the house.
Well, there's Mary.
And there we're all riding in our suits.
And we all have got feathered hats.
These former maids of honour to the late Queen were also there in 1953 and have a good idea of the views that await King Charles at Westminster Abbey.
And we were like a sort of girl band in a sort of way before a girl band existed.
Yes. Goodness me, Anne, this must be the first time we've been in the Abbey like this for 70 years. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
There were more than 8,000 guests at the Queen's coronation, with many millions more watching on TV.
People said, but how did they get so many people in here? Well, of course, it was built up right up
yes,
to the top.
Very, very high.
I'm very glad I wasn't up there. I have suffered from vertigo.
It was an extraordinary spectacle, but 4-year-olds will be 4-year-olds.
He was messing about sort of at the back, picking up things and dropping them. And the Queen Mother was sort of, you know, sort of pulling him back to hold up.
Charles may have been the first child in British history to witness his mother's coronation, but he'd later say his apparent unhappiness here was due to the new slicked-back hairstyle he'd been given. The Prince was first out onto the palace balcony later that day, his sister Anne in tow, as the crowd thronged below. At one point, his late mother had to divert his interest away from her ceremonial bracelet, before an RAF flypast caught his eye. King Charles will have a flypast in his honour tomorrow, and 7 decades after these scenes, he and his Queen will take centre stage on this same balcony. Nina Nanar, News at 10.
And our royal editor, Chris, is back with me. Chris, and we're reporting on this, but we also all want to take it in. What are you going to be looking for tomorrow, do you think?
You know, Reggie, for me, I'll be looking for signs of how this king, King Charles III, is able to connect, not with just the people here who have chosen to come here, but people of different ages and in different parts of the country. Look, be in no doubt, this is going to be a spectacle tomorrow, not just the carriages and the horses, but this, you know, this service that dates back 1,000 years. And the crowd here, clearly, they've camped out in the cold. They were given a great reception. But for me, what's perhaps more important is what are people in Aberdeen or Newcastle or Aberystwyth or Belfast going to make of it? Because, you know, polls show that there are different levels of support for the monarchy in different parts of the country and in different age groups as well. So that, for me, is key. And the biggest danger to the monarchy is indifference. And that's, I think, something they've got to watch out for. I'll be looking out to see if there are any protests tomorrow. Something we've seen recently is more the willingness of Republican campaigners to protest more. But, you know, what are the signs that this monarch is able to bring this country together in the way that his mother did so well for so many years?
Chris, we'll be looking forward to your reporting. Another great spectacle for you to report on. Thanks very much indeed, and for all of us to enjoy. Now, we'll have the build-up from 8:30 in the morning, bright and early, here on ITV1, ITVX and STV. And then the royal arrivals before the ceremony itself at 11 o'clock in the Abbey, just up the road. And that is just about it on the eve of the coronation. The King and Queen Camilla are spending tonight at their London base here at Clarence House. In a few hours' time, dawn will break on the biggest day of their lives. outside Westminster Abbey, the ancient setting where tonight there is quiet and calm, but tomorrow will bring the sound of colour and celebration. From all of us here at Buckingham Palace, good night and enjoy tomorrow.